Mr. Archive.
This is Mr. Archive, returning once again with another story from the hidden pages of time. For those who've traveled with me through every story so far, thank you for keeping the archive alive. And for those hearing my voice for the first time, welcome. Here, we remember what the world forgot. If you wish to keep the echoes of the past alive, lend your support, share these stories, and listen closely. This is Book 3, Echoes of Time. They say time moves forward, but that's only what we want to believe. Time, in truth, folds, circles, and sometimes waits. And somewhere between those folds lives the keeper, the guardian of forgotten stories, the caretaker of history's broken clocks. His home is a library that has no end. Books rise like pillars into the darkness. Some whisper softly when no one is near. Others bleed ink that runs like veins. Every shelf hums faintly, not with sound, but with memory. Tonight, something changed. A single clock on the wall began to tick again. Its sound was uneven, like a heartbeat that didn't know if it wanted to live. The keeper turned. The clock's hands moved backward, and the book beneath it began to open. A breeze swept through the archive, though there was no wind to speak of. The words on the open page rearranged themselves, forming a single sentence. To remember what was lost, follow the sound of the last hour. He picked up his lantern and followed that faint ticking through the endless corridors. As he walked, the shelves around him began to age, wood darkening, dust thickening, air growing colder. The further he went, the older the world felt. And at the corridor's end, a mirror waited, tall, cracked, framed in brass that seemed to breathe. The keeper looked into it, but what he saw was not his reflection. It was himself, much younger, standing in a city that no longer existed. The reflection whispered, "You left us behind." And the mirror rippled like water, then it pulled him in. He landed on a street paved with cobblestone, beneath a sky that pulsed like an old film reel stuck on loop. The air shimmered with the sound of ticking. Hundreds of clocks surrounded him, mounted on walls, hanging from posts, embedded in the stones underfoot. Each one ticked at its own rhythm. Some moved forward, others backward, and a few refused to move at all. The keeper walked slowly. Faces appeared through the fog, men, women, children, each frozen mid-step. One woman carried a letter she never sent. A man held a candle that never melted. A boy clutched a broken watch and stared endlessly at its hands, as if waiting for them to move. They were all prisoners of their final moment. A voice called out from the mist, "Keeper!" He turned and saw an old man sitting beside a ruined fountain. The man's beard was white as frost, his clothes decades old, yet his eyes flickered like clock light. "You came back," the old man said, "but you shouldn't have." "Where am I?" the keeper asked. "The city of ours," the old man replied, "where all lost time goes to die." The keeper felt a weight in his chest. He'd heard of this place once, a myth whispered among the oldest books in the archive. A city built by those who tried to control time and were consumed by it. He followed the sound of a bell deeper into the city. Every step echoed like memory. Buildings leaned inward, as if listening. Through cracked windows, he saw fragments of lives replaying endlessly, families at dinner, soldiers frozen in salute, lovers reaching for each other across an eternity of still air. He realized the truth. These were not ghosts. These were moments trapped forever in the second before they were forgotten. At the center of the city stood a clock tower. Its gears moved without purpose, its pendulum swaying between centuries. And there, at the top of a long staircase, stood a woman in silver robes. Her face was familiar, though he could not remember from where. When she spoke, her voice was calm and cold, like wind brushing through glass. "You shouldn't have come, Keeper," she said. "You are part of this place." He shook his head. "No, I only record what time leaves behind." She smiled faintly. "Then record this." The ground trembled. All the frozen people in the streets turned their heads toward him, their eyes glowing faintly blue. They began to whisper his name, and for the first time he heard what their voices were saying. "You built the archive." The keeper stumbled back. "That's not true. I only guard it." But then memories surged through him, not borrowed ones, but his own. He remembered fire. He remembered a city drowning in its own inventions. He remembered creating a sanctuary to preserve what was being erased. But to protect it, he had given away his own memories, and time had taken the rest. The woman stepped closer. "You built the archive to save history, but when you sealed it, you trapped the world's forgotten time inside. Every story, every lost hour, every name erased from history, they're all still alive, waiting for you to listen." The city around them began to move again, but not forward. The clocks ticked backward. The pendulum froze mid-swing, and the streets filled with shadows that spoke. He saw a child holding an empty hourglass, asking why the sand had stopped. He saw a soldier laying down his weapon, whispering that he'd fought a war no one remembered. He saw a mother reaching for her child, only for both of them to vanish as soon as their story ended. Every forgotten life became an echo, circling endlessly within the folds of time. The keeper closed his eyes, tears streaking down his face. All this time, he thought he was the one listening to their stories, but he finally understood they were listening to his. The archive was not a place apart from time. It was his memory, stretched across eternity. The woman placed her hand on his shoulder. "Now you understand why we stopped the clocks," she said. "Time itself had to rest. It was tired of repeating the same mistakes. The world began to fade, the fog pulling back, the city dissolving into faint light. The last sound he heard was the slow tolling of a bell, the last hour. When he opened his eyes, he was back in the archive. The book before him was closed, its title burned faintly into the cover. He whispered its name under his breath, Echoes of Time. He placed it gently on the shelf beside the others, and as the candlelight flickered, he realized something strange. One of the other books had disappeared. In its place was an empty space, and above it, faint words appeared in the dust. A new title, not yet written, but already waiting. The Man Who Erases History. Thank you for listening, traveler. You've walked through the echoes with me, and perhaps you felt it too. That pull between memory and time. Stories like this remind us that the past isn't gone. It's only sleeping, waiting for someone brave enough to listen again. The Keeper's journey teaches us that remembering can be both a gift and a curse. Because when we recall what others tried to erase, we give those moments life once more. What do you think the echoes of time truly means? Is it the sound of history calling us back, or the voice of something that refuses to be forgotten? Tell me what you think in the comments. I read every thought, every theory, every memory you share. After all, the archive only exists because of those who listen. And if you've stayed until now, you already know the story isn't finished. There's another book, one that shouldn't exist, a book that doesn't preserve the past. It destroys it. Who holds it? Why does it whisper the keeper's name? And what happens when the one who guards history becomes the one who erases it? But that, traveler, is a story for another night. I can almost hear you asking for more. You don't want to stop here, do you? I knew it. All right then, let's not wait for another night. You've come this far. I can't leave you hanging in the dark. This is Book 4, The Man Who Erased History. Because some stories refuse to stay forgotten, even when the world itself tries to bury them. The candlelight flickered as the keeper stood before the shelves once more. Where the book echoes of time once rested, there was now an empty space, a hollow frame of dust, and beside it, something new, a faint outline of a book that shouldn't exist. It was as though the memory of a book had burned itself into the wood. No title, no author, just a whisper carved into the silence. Erase me before I remember. The keeper hesitated. He'd seen many strange things within the archive, books that wept, clocks that bled ink, shelves that rearranged themselves when no one watched. But this was different. This was a warning. He reached out anyway. The moment his fingertips brushed the air where the invisible book rested, a spark of light flared, and the world around him unraveled. Pages tore themselves from the shelves. Ink ran like rivers across the floor, and through it all, a shadow took shape, tall, still, wearing a mask of white porcelain. The figure's voice was calm, patient, almost kind. "You kept them alive too long," it said. "Stories are meant to fade, keeper." "You've broken the balance." The keeper stepped back. "Who are you?" "I am the silence that follows every word," the figure replied. "I am the absence that history demands." He tilted his head, the mask cracking faintly down the middle. "I am what you created when you refused to forget." The keeper's lantern flickered weakly. He looked around. The archive was dissolving, shelves fading into dust. The voices of the forgotten whispered in panic, their words tangled and broken. "You can't erase them," the keeper said. "They're memories. They belong to the world." The masked man moved closer. "Then let the world carry them, not you." He extended his hand, and the flame inside the lantern went out. Darkness again. But this time, there was no peace in it. The keeper opened his eyes to find himself standing in a place that wasn't the archive anymore. A vast white field stretched endlessly in every direction. No sound, no shadow, no clock, just blankness, as if time itself had been scrubbed clean. And in the distance, something was being written. Invisible words, carved by unseen hands, forming across the sky. All history begins with remembering, but it ends with me. The masked figure appeared again, holding the invisible book, except now the cover bore a single pulsing mark, the same scar the keeper once saw in his dreams. "This is where stories die," the figure said, "where the archive ends and the forgetting begins." The keeper clenched his fists. "If you erase everything, there'll be nothing left for the world to learn from." The figure tilted his head again. "And yet they never do. They repeat the same mistakes over and over. Don't you see? Forgetting is mercy." The keeper's breath trembled. He knew that voice, not its tone, but its rhythm. The way it carried words, it was his own. "You're not real," the keeper whispered. "You're what I tried to bury." The figure stepped closer until a crack in the mask aligned perfectly with the keeper's reflection in it. "When you built the archive," the man said, "you took pieces of yourself, the pain, the loss, the guilt, and locked them away. But memory has a price, and now the debt has come due." The field began to crumble piece by piece, as if an unseen eraser swept across existence. The keeper's memories flashed before him. Every story he'd ever preserved, every voice he'd ever saved, now fading, their names dissolving into light. He reached out, desperate, shouting into the void. But his own voice was starting to fade too. And as the light consumed the last trace of the archive, only one sound remained. The ticking of a single clock, slow, deliberate, the sound of time rewriting itself. The ticking grew softer, then slower, until it stopped completely. Silence. And in that silence, the keeper finally understood. The man who erased history wasn't his enemy. He was his reflection, the part of himself that wanted to rest, the part that was tired of carrying everyone else's memories while forgetting his own. But the world doesn't stop needing stories. Even if they fade, even if they hurt, they matter. Because every story erased takes a piece of us with it. The keeper stood in the void, surrounded by nothing. And yet, somehow, he began to speak. Not to anyone, but to everyone. To remember, he whispered, is to live twice. Once in the moment, and once in the memory. And with those words, a faint spark returned. One by one, pages began to reappear in the air, empty at first, but slowly filling with ink. Not the same as before. Different. Brighter. Truer. The archive was rebuilding itself, not from what was lost, but from what was learned. And when the light finally dimmed, the keeper stood once more in his endless library. Dust settled gently on the shelves. A new book waited where the empty space had been, its cover shimmering with a quiet pulse of life. He placed his hand over it and smiled softly. "Not everything should be remembered," he said, "but nothing deserves to be erased completely." And so, traveler, the story of the keeper continues. But before we close this chapter, let's take a moment, you and I. After hearing the tale of echoes of time and the man who erased history, what do you think it truly means? Do we preserve the past to protect it? Or do we let it fade so that we can move forward? Maybe there's no right answer. Maybe the truth lies somewhere in between, in how we choose to remember. Tell me your thoughts. What part of the story spoke to you the most? Which side would you choose, the keeper or the eraser? Share your theories in the comments, your ideas, your emotions. They're what give this archive its voice. And who knows, your words might just shape the next chapter waiting to be told. If there's a forgotten mystery, a strange legend, or a hidden story you want us to uncover next, leave it below. Because sometimes the best stories are the ones we write together. Thank you for listening, traveler, for staying with me through every echo, every silence, every page that time tried to erase. Your support, every like, every share, every word you speak, keeps the archive alive. Until the next night, keep your clocks close, your memories closer, and your heart open to the stories time forgot. Good night.